A very good afternoon to all our viewers. Welcome back to this session of GETI Life Talk. I'm Shivani Srivastav, Relationships Manager at Global Education and Training Institute. Today we have Ms. Madhavi Kuckreja, who is the founder of the Sanatkara Foundation. I welcome you, ma'am, to our platform. And she founded this Sanatkara, which is an NGO around 10 to 12 years back, and it is an initiative to bring traditional crafts and textile of this country to the people of Lucknow and everyone who visits Lucknow, whether from India or abroad. Her main work, or she works towards the empowerment of women, and today she is here with us and she will be addressing us all and talking about challenges faced in empowering women. So once again, I welcome ma'am and I hand over our virtual platform to ma'am for further things.
Okay. Adab, everybody. Hello from Lucknow, and I'll just start with my journey because I think that the word empowering women is become such a, in some ways, a very simple word now, and everyone talks about the achievements of how things have changed, and that the journey of empowerment, everyone feels that they have a formula. After working in the sector 30 years and working both in the rural and urban sector, and I'll talk about various fields that I have worked in, I feel that I still don't have the formula. And I just have the challenges in front of me rather than the formula. And of course, I'd love to hear from you at the end of the talk where you stand on these issues. But I think that even though we've celebrated many milestones in this journey, and fair enough, I mean, we've had years of the women, we have, internationally, the girl child being celebrated. We talk about women's empowerment, we talk about women in politics, we talk about women in the armed forces, we talk about women in all sectors now. I mean, of course, the teaching sector always had a lot of women as educationists. And that I want to mark from the beginning because I know that this is a platform for educationists. And I think that the fact that there have been many women in the field, and I still feel that we have not addressed the challenges enough in this sector. I like to begin with a little definition of empowerment, which, of course, many people have taken education as one way of getting to empowerment, and of course, it is. Livelihood is another road to empowerment, so to speak. And then you have, technical skills as a road to empowerment, and many other. But I think education and livelihood are the two sort of main things that people speak about. And if you look at things like politics as a way of getting into, whether it's you take it as a livelihood or as another sector. But I think that the main pillars of empowerment are also a women's ca- capacity and her confidence and her own self-worth that have to be first looked at. And along with that, I think some of the indicators, and there are many, and many surveys have been done, are on decision making. But for me, these are the ones I'm choosing today to speak about, is the issues of decision making, her mobility, and a life free of violence, and the ability to be able to make her own decisions and choices. So, decision making versus also the right to choice, because often you're left to making decisions for yourself in your life, but in a limited a parameter and framework. I think basically also the other reason why I feel that it's only challenges is because we look at the indicators in the outside sphere, and we rarely measure and look at women's empowerment in the home. because that is often as a baseline taken for granted that women's role at home is non-negotiable. And even if we speak about, they say that a vehicle has four wheels and you need all the wheels to take it ahead. But the roles that are defined and divided and accepted are mostly that the woman's role at home, uh, as a caregiver for children, for elderly people, as the primary taking care of the home, that is not questioned. And with that, you can add empowerment in the fact that she's in the outside space empowered in many cases. But at home, we because it's very difficult to measure those indicators, and the most empowered of women, including myself, fall into the old traps of what it is to be at home. So you might step outside and take many and seem very strong, but in your home, you will do play certain roles, because then after all, you don't want to fight all your battles, and you feel that we might as well compromise on this. And it's okay if we I mean, at least we've got this, at least we've been able to be in the outside world, and at least we've been allowed to have this different life. So we should not challenge what is in the home front too much, and it's okay if we compromise on that. For me, that is in fact very problematic, and I think as women in particular, we should keep questioning and looking at ourselves. If I look at the fact that, because I mean, here I've worked before I set up Sanat Kada and worked in livelihood, which is with crafts people. I used to also work, and I want to talk for a few minutes, about 5 minutes, about my life in Chitrakoot and Banda. And I worked with rural women there. And because I worked with rural women, I often felt that women who I worked with, that was mostly Dalit women and tribal women, who were rural women, who were laborers. In fact, in some sectors, they had more empowerment than many of the upper caste and upper class women. So women who were working in the field of being farmers, or whether they were being laborers, because they had a lot of mobility and a certain ability to make money for themselves. I won't say that they were empowered in many other indicators, but of course, definitely they could deal with the outside world. They could deal with the marketplace. They knew how to travel in trains. The tribal women took minor forest produce and wood out there. And so it's really interesting that then the normal indicators don't work, and it all gets jumbled and confused. Um, I'll give you a quick example, which is my favorite example, is that we trained women as hand pump mechanics. This was from between 92 and 94 in Chitrakoot. And these were illiterate women. And they decided to learn how to repair pumps, because that there was a lot of issues of water in their areas, and in the villages in Chitrakoot and Banda. And this is in Bundelkhand, on the border of MP and UP. And when they decided, everyone thought this was like really funny, including the high authorities of UP Jal Nigam, who manage the pumps. But it's interesting that women in Delhi, in Lucknow, in New York, in fact, you have no women in the field of plumbing or electricians. There are no women there even today, even in these places which have high indicators as far as women's empowerment goes. There are no women in these sectors. One is that people feel they don't have the technical skills. Secondly, how will they go from one place to the other, repairing pumps, for instance, or working as an electrician? And actually, women can be very skilled in their hands. So, I mean, and these illiterate women were the first in UP to learn how to repair pumps. And in the process, not I mean they learned how the parts of the pump and the various problems through games, and through calling the different tools different names. Like, I was called a cylinder. And they broke many myths of empowerment by carrying on to be illiterate. but going from village to village, repairing hand pumps. And in the end, it was that even the pradhans of the villages who used to practice untouchability against them in the beginning would make them sit on a charpai, give them a cup of tea, call them in with respect because they wanted their pump repaired. The journey wasn't easy. Their own husbands and families also put up a lot of resistance. But the point is that they did, and of course, they earned some money. They challenged all the stereotypes. Their confidence increased. They could deal with the whole community. And they became known in that area as women hand pump mechanics. And they had like an image of being a certain a star and an empowered women. And people came to them for advice on violence against women, for advice on government schemes, just because they were so much around in the area. On the other hand, if I move to, so that's just an example of what I'm trying to say, that even though they carried on to being illiterate, a skill can give you empowerment if it comes with all the other things. While on the other hand, if I talk about highly educated people at times, and they say that even women IAS officers often have to pay the highest a dowry because they marry a man as an IAS officer, and that's even got a larger. I mean, her dowry, even the dowry she has to pay, increases with her education. So I think it's often that women who have had the highest education of bachelors and masters, and then if they get married into certain types of homes where they don't get that space, forget the fact that they're not allowed to work. If they don't get that equality and dignity, they still follow these traditions like, say, dowry. They have very little decision making power in their choices, in what they're allowed to do, where they're allowed to go. They're limited to their homes, and I often I remember even my mother in that, is that she was a very my mother just passed away last month, in that she was a double MA, and she brought us up. And I think I'm going to put this out, and there are going to be a lot of questions. So, was she an empowered woman or not? And I think in certain fields, she was an empowered woman because, of course, she supported a daughter like me. But in many other ways, she always put herself behind and let in her role as a caregiver. And that was her primary goal. And often, I don't think she even questioned whether she should be in that role or not in that role. I mean, it was just like something she had just grown up to become. So, I mean, I think that that whole thing of when you make decisions with limited number of choices, you know that if you have to get married, then it's your duty to bring up your children, and because it's your responsibility, then you somehow, it's a limited decision making that you make. And you of course say that, oh, I'm happily doing this for my children. But then, I mean, there can be, of course, many children who are brought up with both the parents, and giving input in different ways, sharing that responsibility, sharing not only the work but even that the inputs that are given into children. And people who have to both work anyway don't have the luxury of giving everything up to bring up their children. Violence against women again is another thing. In our figures in Chitrakoot and Banda, and even here we found that a larger amount of violence against women, the figures are much higher, and the extreme violence is much more in upper caste, upper class women, because the question of bringing this out of the family is much more challenging for them. While, I mean, I know maybe I'm generalizing, and I'm not saying that there's no violence among poorer women, but at least there is a whole thing of a community there. They say their walls are thinner, so their voices come out much more, and their parda and their whole thing of them being inside many levels of walls is much less. It was very interesting when I came into the livelihood sector. A lot of craftswomen, and that's Sanat Kada, and we have a festival, and we run a shop. So many weavers are women. Many people do beautiful embroidery. This is, I'm talking about Kutch, Rajasthan, chicken curry workers in Lucknow, Zardozi workers. They have had amazing skills in their hands, not from now, but from many generations. And when they come out, but yet, what is the marketplace dominated by? They do get a small amount of money. This is also as part of, like, there was a whole movement in India for savings groups, that, oh, women will earn a small amount of money and keep it for themselves. But this was such a big deal that a woman can have a little bit of money to buy a sari for herself. Because even now in rural India, a woman doesn't buy her sari herself. Her father-in-law or her husband often buys the clothes for her and brings it in. So I do think that it was really interesting when I came into the livelihood sector 10 years ago to find that in the Sanat Kada um, festival, where we had 70 stalls, mostly the weavers stall, the women craftspersons would not come themselves to the exhibitions. So the women would be weaving, the women would be embroidering, the women would be doing chicken curry, but in the market were the men. So the marketplace, again, because it involves mobility, it involves bargaining, it involves being, it, that was a space where women were rarely seen. And when even we started Sanat Kada and the whole festival, and our shop was run by all women, people found that really amazing and different. The craft groups found it different, because again, the whole thing of how will women come alone by train with the materials from their villages, how will they manage the accounts, how will they, so they were not given these skills, even though, so whatever skill they were given in their craft sector was very limited and not allowing them to be empowered in every which way. So obviously the people who are doing the marketing and who are out there obviously earn more of the pot of money than the person who's actually doing the craft. Because the person who's doing the craft is so to market the craft, they're so dependent on other people, which is mostly men, 80%, then people would completely not come out. So I mean, I think that even today, with all this with livelihood and everything being like something that, women are empowered, look at the weaving they do, the embroidery they do, but actually if you go and do a survey with all the indicators, you'll find that those women have not actually been able to change, except in one small way. And I'm not saying there's no change, there's no empowerment. The empowerment is then very limited. um, it's also that in the same way, so people started coming to the Sanat Kada festival because they said, oh, it's run by women, so the women we send are now feeling comfortable and we know you look after all of them. And I think that I mean, as far as violence goes, that's not something. I mean, that is very difficult to speak about. We all know that, and violence is only can be spoken once there are certain, the violence in the home in particular, or even sexual assault in the outside space. You need courage, you need confidence to speak about it. So unless we make, like, say in many corporate workspaces, we've now made sexual harassment work committees and things like that. Even there, where people know that it's legal by the law, you can go, women think so many times before they complain there, because they know that they'll complain today, then they'll have to deal with the whole backfiring of it for the next so many months. I'm on innumerable number of sexual harassment committee. It's so difficult for women to come out and complain because of the whole thing around it, what happens in the whole institutional space, what happens after that, what happens in your families. So the kind of confidence and courage that we have to bring, and these are educated women who are in the workplace for often many years. So even if you make and I think that for domestic violence, child sexual abuse, these are things that livelihood groups, craft groups, savings groups, development committees, and whether it's the panchayat or anybody, the nobody gives you that feminist space. By feminist space, I mean to listen to all this with that perspective, to listen to the woman, to support her, to know that she has someone with her in the whole journey. We all know that places like the courts and the police are so difficult with the patriarchal setup. So I think that till issues of violence against women, all women are able to talk about that. And whether you're empowered and you're an IAS officer, or you're a school teacher, or you're a Air Force pilot, if you are facing violence in your own home, then I don't think that the empowerment indicators, we failed somewhere. And if I come to the field, so often, I mean, the journey of somebody who is completely, say, maybe illiterate, in a farming family, with all the the problems of speaking up in say a rural home, uh, the challenge is I won't say as much, but nearly as much for a urban empowered family, a girl from a family, because the so-called societal backlash, the so-called spaces don't exist for this kind of thing. And I think that a life free of violence is a first, for me, I mean, it's a regular human right. It's also an important parameter for to make somebody empowered. As far as the education sector goes, I think that even though I think we've got a long way to go as far as curriculum goes, I want to give an example of a group of women journalists in Chitrakoot and Banda, and in many parts of Bundelkhand, then in Banaras and Faizabad too, called Khabar Leheria, who are the first rural women's journalist collective of largely Dalit and Muslim women. And it was such a huge thing that women will be journalists. Why don't we have any rural women journalists? Now, of course, the main media channels and maybe newspapers in larger cities have journalists, but even then, except for that, it's very limited. And rural women, um, I mean, you cannot, they're literally none besides this collective, say, in UP. And I think that someone like them, their education, even though limited in the normal school sense, came from their training to be journalists, their knowledge on political issues, social issues, the fact that they can write about them, their voice is heard, they bring people's voices. They have it's not a newspaper only, they have a video channel, couple area, you can look at it. And that to me is more of a model of empowerment rather um, than other normal people, because some normal, I mean, sectors that you take. So I'm not saying that educationists or teachers are not, they are probably, they think about empowerment, but are they able to, in their curriculum, in their classes, in their schools, in their colleges, along with finishing the syllabus and the curriculum, are you as educationists able to provide space for people to make, for women to make more decisions, for women's mobility to increase, for women in your women and men, of course. I mean, I've not focused on men because I think I thought I'd first talk about the people who are responsible for their own empowerment, which I think is women, is Is there space for these discussions? Is there space for people to come out with it? Why is child sexual abuse not something that's been taken up? And so I think that, and along with that, there's a whole mental health issue. There's issues of sexuality, which also are not at all challenged in the sphere of the educational institutions the way I see them. And because they don't give enough time and space and purview for that, there's a huge issue and a huge challenge about empowerment remaining um, mm, unfinished, the agenda remaining unfinished, because in that space that you have, you don't give enough. And I would say that along with the formal education, at least 50% of the time or 30% of the time should be given to these indicators and to seeing how the girls are doing with these indicators, because we've had education for women for the last 100 years, and I know that some things have changed because of that, but I'm still challenging all of us to make many things change because of that. I'll finish with that and I'll open it to any questions that anyone have.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think everyone has really understood what you have told, and that was really, engaging and inspiring about empowering the women. Uh, I have a question here. Like you said that the schools should also work towards the empowerment. I wanted to know, like, many a times we see in the family itself that the male member is given more importance, or he is allowed to go out, but the girls, on the other hand, are not. So, how can parents work towards this? What kind of attitude do the parents need to have for this, for the empowerment of the women at the basic level when they are at
Yeah,
home?
yeah. I think, I mean, of course, discussions. The fact is that the parents have already been educated and they still, as when I talked about being part of our curriculum, I think I meant to include in our curriculum the a whole module on, say, mobility and why are women not allowed to go. So, I mean, if you will, so what are the reasons? And of course, everyone knows it's because the parents want to be protective, the world is different. But in the process, the women's confidence doesn't be built and is not built, and they lose out on a lot of opportunities. So, the whole thing is that if the parents are missed out, I mean, are there sessions in school about it? Is the school, for example, pushing girls to the girls, if they're not allowed to say represent the school somewhere outside? Are we having those conversations with the parents? Are we giving as part of, like, when you're having a parent teacher meeting, for example, why aren't you talking about issues of mobility for the girls? Why can't you have a discussion on that? Why can't you have a discussion on sexuality and what the needs are of girls and boys? And so these are topics that are really taboo. I mean, if there's a problem, there's some scandal or something, then people talk about it. That, oh, either if something happens with, but because I think that girls also want, if they can deal with the outside world much more once they have the opportunity, because the parents have already been educated. So unless the girl fights with them and says that, I mean, children often do, they often fight with their parents, which is a good kind of fight, and change their parents also. But I think that educational institutions have to give time to the parents, and particularly you can make out which parents are pulling their daughters back in some way, and then have that conversation with them. But there is no space in that. I mean, parent teacher meetings are only about academic excellence. That's
Right.
all.
Yeah, so
So,
everyone need to work together, whether it's the family, whether it's the school, or even the society at large. They should
no,
work
of course,
together
of
for
course, of course. Yeah,
empowering
yeah.
the women.
Yeah, but the
Yeah,
society at large is not going to work without some people, being the change makers, the people to chabi lagao, as they say, to turn the key. So, I mean, often there are many kids who do change their parents and grandparents, for instance, and do things that their mother was not able to do. Uh, um, I mean, I'm one of them. So,
Yeah,
I think that you have to keep challenging both in the personal and the of outside sphere. I'm coming back to that all the time.
yeah,
So, of
yeah.
often
Thank you.
people. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, yeah. No, you were saying something, ma'am.
No, no, I was just saying that we don't even know often what the state of the life, because um, often people became teachers, women in particular, because that was supposed to be the best and the safest career for women.
Right,
Well, today we know that being in education is very challenging, of course, because you're dealing with so many lives and everything. But I mean, often parents, even now, said, it's good, you'll have half a day at work. I mean, it's a myth now because the teachers are often on the job the whole day and are much more intertwined. But still, teaching is taken as a safe career. So if someone's come into it and not gone into the Air Force, or not driving a train, or something like completely crazy because it's a safe career, then as an educationist, are they going to be able to encourage the next generation to take those steps also? I don't know, because
right.
they themselves were put into this. I mean, I'm not blaming anyone, but then it's that whole cycle
Cycle.
that goes on. And I mean, I'm telling you, even the craft groups that we work with, they often there is a very good craftsperson in Kutch who does ajrak, and he goes all over the world. But the team members he calls to go and sell his products in China with him is not his sister and his daughter and his wife, because they're not very good craftspersons, but he says they don't have the confidence, so he takes the Sanatkada team members with him, to sell there, because he says, oh, these girls are so confident, and they're so good at this, and they can speak to everyone, and they don't get nervous. But that didn't happen by jadoo. I mean, it happened because it was the girls worked on it, they got a supportive atmosphere to work on it, and that's why they had the confidence to face the world. So I think that that's also very important to remember.
Yes. Thank you so much, ma'am. That was really enlightening. Getting to know how even the individuals, like once the individual is ready by himself or herself, only then bigger changes can be made.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's
I once
definitely.
again thank you for joining in and being a part of Getty's disruptive education movement. And I thank all our viewers for being here. With this, we come to an end to today's session. We'll meet again soon with another very informative session. Until then, thank you, goodbye, and take care.
Keep up, Getty, the disruptive education movement. I love the name.
Yes.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
Thank you so much, ma'am.